Good evening everyone and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update for the last day of February, the last day of summer 2014. My name is Chris Nitzo and tonight most of our broadcast will be talking exclusively about the upcoming Coral Sea Tropical Cyclone or Tropical Low. And we will cover very briefly at the end the possibility of a Western Australian system in the longer term. But because there's so much doubt into that one and it's so long away, we won't spend too much time on it. Firstly, let's take a look at some of the rainfall expected over the next week. Alright, tomorrow we're going to see a breakdown of the trough system in Queensland, and so what we're going to see is very isolated shower and storm activity in the western parts of Queensland. It'll be extremely isolated though. Most of it will be located in the northwestern districts and the Gulf country. In the Northern Territory, we're still going to see a reasonably active period of weather still remaining in the northern inland parts of the NT, and also some shower and storm activity, fairly general activity off the North Kimberley coastline. As we head towards Sunday, we continue to see that activity in the NT and the far northern Kimberley, and also a little bit happening in the northeastern parts of the Northern Territory around Gove and just inland in the Arnhem district as well. In the Queensland region, that trough system weakens out completely, so those storms become very isolated even in the Gulf country. We get some fairly dry air pushing into Queensland, and we also see a little bit of activity developing and continuing in the northern peninsula region. The Pilbara remains sky clear. As we head to Monday, we see slight redevelopment of those showers and storms, although they're going to be very isolated. It's very difficult to get enough moist air in there, and there is a fair bit of stability in the inland parts of Queensland and the southern parts of the Northern Territory, so it's going to be hard to see widespread activity, but we might get some pretty good lightning with some storms there over the Monday period, or in the Monday period. And we go into NT and we continue to see this area starting or continuing to fire up. We are likely to see a very weak low developing, if it hasn't already, but we should see it develop around the North Kimberley, around the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, maybe just inland of that region. Look, at this stage it's not expected to form into a cyclone in the short to medium term. In the longer term, there are some signs that as it pushes well off the Pilbara coast, that it may form into a more significant system. But even then, some of the models, or all the models that I've seen so far, have the system missing the Pilbara coast anyway. But we'll continue to watch that and monitor that as we head later next week, because really for the first part of next week, all eyes will be over Queensland. On Tuesday, we can see the Queensland, the Coral Sea region firing up here in the central Coral Sea, or the central northern Coral Sea. We have an increase in activity, and that activity is starting to push west and starting to hit the Queensland coast anywhere from about Cardwell or Ingham northwards. We're starting to see an increase in shower activity. Now that will all be due to the upcoming tropical low or cyclone as it pushes to the west. We'll talk more about that shortly. Over the inland regions, once again, there's a lot of dry air, a lot of stability in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, which is going to limit thunderstorm development, or at least rainfall from thunderstorm development. And we continue to see this active area here over the North Kimberley, and as I said, that area is favoured to see a weak tropical low forming, but at this stage it remains weak. So, for the 4 days after that though, things get very interesting, and we'll talk why in Queensland shortly, but basically a low or cyclone is expected to either hit the coast or get extremely close to the coast before pushing off into the southeast or pushing off to the west. Now, we're not sure which one of those two options will be favoured at this point in time, because there's a few different steering mechanisms. But regardless, we're going to see a fairly big increase in rainfall over the Tuesday to Saturday period next week, anywhere from about Princess Charlotte Bay south to about Mackay, maybe even further south if the lower cyclone decides to travel further south. In the Northern Territory WA region, we're going to see fairly general showers and storms in the northwestern areas and the northwestern extremities as this tropical low pushes to the west. Now remember, as we head into next weekend, potential for it to develop into a cyclone increases, but by then the system is expected to be well off the WA coast, and not looking likely that there's going to be a very strong trough system to push it back to the south, at least until it clears the Pilbara region. So at this point in time, folks, we're not really confident of a cyclone affecting the Pilbara in the next 10 days, but there is just some slight signs that there could be one forming in the next 10 days, just not hitting the coast. Big one though, let's talk about Queensland. If we look further to the east around Fiji, we've got the tropical low that could form into a cyclone over the next few days as it tracks in a south to southeast direction. Now, we can see associated with that a very, very strong convection convergence in this region called in the South Pacific Convergence Zone and attached to a monsoon trough. The MJO is going off in this region at the moment. We've got a very strong pulse of the MJO out there, and that's creating all that cloud. But that's not really what we're interested in. What we're interested in comes out further to the west. Now you can see this band of heavy thunderstorm activity or heavy cloud associated with the tropical low that we're watching. It's only a very weak system. It's under a fair bit of wind shear. You can see here the thunderstorms bubble up and then get sheared away to the west due to the wind shear that is occurring in the area. So at this point in time, we're not expecting this particular system to form into a cyclone in the next couple of days, but things do get better for its development later on. So we are looking at it as it pushes further to the west and a little bit more to the south. We are looking at conditions improving for its development. The Bureau of Meteorology have also upgraded the potential for a tropical cyclone form even to moderate by Monday. That might be a little bit enthusiastic. Perhaps Monday to Tuesday, more so Tuesday is the time frame we're looking at OCC for it forming into a cyclone. But look, there is certainly that potential for it as it heads into more favourable conditions and away from that wind shear to develop a little earlier, as the Bureau predict there. Moderate is 20 to 50% chance of the system forming. High would be the next stage, which is 50% plus. Now at this stage overall, the system has around about a 70% chance of forming into a tropical cyclone at some point in its life. May not necessarily in the next 3 days, but at some point in its life cycle, it has about a 70% chance of forming into a TC. So if we look at the satellite-derived wind estimates for this particular system right now, we can see that the system, the centre is quite hard to locate because it's part of a fairly trophy low type feature here. You can see that there's really no evidence of a full-on low-level circulation centre, and this is probably about the best guess of where one could be, and that's at around about 14 degrees south, around about 155 or 156 degrees east, and really that can change by a couple of degrees over the next day or two as it consolidates its low-level circulation centre. So don't be surprised if it gets moved around and shoved around on the synoptic maps over the next couple of days while it tries to centralise itself. Now, because it's under a lot of wind shear at the moment, that centre could realign under the maximum convection region. So don't be surprised, as I say, if it does move a couple of 100 k's east or a couple of 100 k's west, or even 100 or so k's north or south. So just letting you be aware of that, and that can play a fairly major role in its forecast track. Now, if you note that positioning I mentioned about 14 south, 155 east, now that's a fair way west of where most of the model guidance is actually placing this low right now. So the area of investigation, as I said, may change a few hundred kilometres to the east. Now we can see overall over the next 3 days the system will track very, very, very slowly to the west or west-southwest, under the influence of some fairly weak ridging at that point in time, although the ridge does deepen towards the end of the 3-day period. And so what we get, not deepen, but strengthen. So what we actually get is an increase in steering from the southeasterly trade winds and the easterly ridge. So we should see probably a acceleration of the system to the west early next week, or southwest early next week. Now, along with that acceleration, we should see conditions improve for its further development as well. So it's a matter of how far it remains offshore and where it actually is in terms of how well it can develop in the medium term. So at this point in time, models differ quite significantly. This is the Access model from the Bureau of Meteorology, and the Access G model, for instance, has this system hitting land probably around Princess Charlotte Bay as a Category 1 tropical cyclone on the Wednesday morning next week. And so this is quite different to a lot of other guidance, but it's also backed by the latest version of the European model, which also suggests a tropical low or weak tropical cyclone to hit the coast right around that Cooktown to Princess Charlotte Bay area, around about a bit later though, so in that Thursday to maybe Friday next week. The access model, the EC model has it hitting. Now, this is quite, both of those models are quite northerly outliers. The more favoured region for the actual crossing of the system, if it crosses. Now, remember I did say there's a lot of doubt about whether it'll cross, and there still is a lot of doubt whether it'll cross. But those models that do cross it probably a little bit further to the south, most of them. So at the moment, the European and the Bureau of Meteorology's access models are quite northerly outliers, particularly the Bureau of Meteorology's access model, which is a long way further north even than the European. The European has it crossing around Cooktown, as I say, on the Thursday, Friday. This one, Princess Charlotte Bay. Now, most of the other guidance, as I said, let's have a look at it. And we'll start with the experimental FIM9 model, and we can see it developing and pushing in a much more south to southwest direction and nearing the Queensland coast, more around the central Queensland coast or even parts of the Hervey Bay region. So we can see here that the system forms and pushes fairly well west-southwest to southwest, but then quickly gets captured and pushed in a more south and then eventually south-southeast direction parallel to the coast as it travels further down the coast. Now we see that wind speeds are getting quite high in this, possibly as high as a Category 3 tropical cyclone at times. So this is, as I say, an experimental model, but it shows a reasonable accuracy. Although, once again, it's not an operational model just yet, so we do need to take it with a grain of salt. But we do need to understand that there are quite a number of varied options here for this system to take, and we'll go through a couple of different steering mechanisms for those options. But really, that is certainly a southern outlier. So I've shown you a northern outlier, which has a system crossing around Princess Charlotte Bay, and it's important I show you a southern outlier just to show you that there is a lot of doubt as to where this system will actually cross and if this system will actually cross. So you can see here the FIM model pushes it southwest and then south and then doesn't actually cross the coast. If you notice the last few frames here, it starts to push in a more southerly to south-southeasterly direction. One thing that's not filling us with a lot of confidence in the European model just at the moment is the simple fact that it keeps chopping and changing its scenario by about 700 to 800 kilometers with each run, and this makes it very difficult for us to place too much faith in this computer model. Normally it would be the computer model we place the most faith in. So it's important, as I say, as Oz Cyclone Chasers, even though this is our favorite model, it is important that we understand when it is struggling to actually identify something that's going on, and at the moment it really is struggling a little bit. So this is 24 hours, this is tonight, and where the low should be lying tonight. This was taken 24 hours ago, so this was 10 p.m. last night's run. This is 10 a.m. this morning's run. Now we can see here in both runs that the system lies in a very similar position. Now that's about the extent of their similarities, because as we head to day 4, we see the system last night was modelled to be off the southeastern tip of PNG. The system this morning on day 4 will be located in a similar vicinity, and then what happens is the ridge takes hold of this system in the latest model run and pushes it almost due west, whereas in the previous run we see a system that was pushing a lot more southwest. So let's have a look what happens at day 5. So by Wednesday we're looking at the system here being a tropical cyclone on last night's run, whereas this morning's run we see the system a much more elongated tropical low and a lot further to the north. Now the key difference here is that the steering mechanism here will be different compared to the steering mechanism that was here. So this steering mechanism of a stronger system will likely push a stronger system in a more southerly direction. A weaker system will likely be pushed in a more westerly direction, and if we track the model guidance further on out to its maximum here that we've got access to, which is 174 hours, we see that exact thing happening. We see that the stronger tropical cyclone pushes more in a south to southwest direction. The weaker tropical low that we see in the guidance at the moment pushes in a more westerly direction. And folks, it doesn't seem like it here, but that's a huge variability in the guidance, because this is, as I say, a situation where it's hitting north of Cooktown, whereas in the previous run we had a situation where it was lying just off the coast of Cairns, and so that's 300 or 400 kilometers out to about 6 or 7 days worth of guidance, and so that doesn't fill us with a lot of confidence that the European is all over this scenario. In contrast, we have the GFS model guidance, which does seem to have a tighter grasp over the last 4 or 5 model runs of the system's track. Now, we're not too worried about the GFS forecast intensity, because intensity tends to be overcooked by the GFS a fair bit. But what we're interested in here is the track of the system. Now, this was 3 model runs ago. This was 2 model runs ago. This is at 3 days' time. We see the system fairly similar location, and this is the latest model run just coming out as we're writing this. So we can see here that in 3 days' time the GFS has an excellent handle on where the system is likely to be based on its 3 different model runs. So as we head to day 4, we can see that by Tuesday the GFS has this a tropical cyclone, but once again we see fairly tight agreement over the last few runs from the GFS model, varying by maybe just about 100 kilometres or so over 3 model runs, which tends to suggest that they've got a pretty good handle on the steering mechanisms associated with this system. So that's at day 4. And even as we head towards day 5, we see the GFS developing this into a significant Category 2, possibly even later on Category 3 TC, but Category 2 TC there. And we see once again over the 3 model runs at the same time period, we're looking at maybe 100 to maybe 150 kilometre difference in the position of the system. So really over 5 days, that is pretty significantly accurate model guidance. So at this stage, the GFS seems to be getting a handle on the circulation a little bit better. Once again, just be careful when we're starting to look at categories and intensities, because the GFS does try to overcook the situation, particularly early in a cyclone's life cycle. So that's just something for us to be aware. If we take a look at the world's second most accurate model, the UK Met. Now, the UK Met has been quite similar in its last few runs as well. So once again, they seem to have a pretty good grasp on this tropical low as well. So if we look at 24 hours time, we see the low out here in the northeast Coral Sea. 48 hours, it really doesn't move anywhere. 72 hours, it starts to move more in a west-southwesterly direction. And at day 4, we see the system washing out a little bit, but that's only a very short-lived washout, because once we work a little bit of magic, and while we can't show you the official UK Met model out past day 4, what we can do is we can put in the coordinates for the actual system itself, and then if we do that, looking from day 3 through to day 4, through to day 5, day 6, and as we head into day 7, we start to see the system drifting in a more southwest to south-southwest direction on its approach to the coast. And once again, there's a little bit of variability in the UK Met guidance overall as to whether this makes landfall or whether it juts more to the south and then south-southeast and follows the coastline down, a little bit like what the FIM model was showing us. So the UK Met Ensemble, or the UK MOGREPS, is showing us that there is some variability as to whether this goes bang and hits the coast, or whether it sort of moves in a much more southerly direction to hit the coast, or whether it sort of drifts right next to the coast and pushes in a south and then south-southeast and then southeast direction. So there is a lot of guidance variability still, people, in this Queensland Coral Sea system. So here's the variability on the Thursday from the GFS model. Now we see that some of the models have this system hitting the coast anywhere from about Cairns southwards through to around about Bowen, but some of the guidance still has, or most of the guidance still has, the system being just offshore, and even some of it has it pushing a lot further to the east. So this is by Thursday. And once again, if we look at that on a spaghetti model plot by next Thursday, you can see the systems. There's probably about 5 or 6 out of the 20 model members that have already hit the coast. As I say, anywhere from about Cairns southwards. But there are still, out of those, 10 to 15 model members that keep the system offshore. Some of these model members keep the system fairly strong, as in 985 hectopascals or less. So that's a category 2 or 3 TC out here, according to some of the guidance. If we take a look at the CMC ensemble at the same time, Thursday morning next week, we can see that some of the guidance has once again pushed the system onshore, anywhere from about Cooktown south to about Townsville. But those guidance, or the models that keep it offshore, keep it well offshore at day 6, which is Thursday. So there is a lot of variability there in the CMC, and the CMC does not have a very good handle on this system whatsoever. Day 6 in the Euro, and once again we see that on Thursday overall we expect the system to be remaining off the North Tropical coastline, somewhere in the vicinity of probably Princess Charlotte Bay south to about Cairns. And by day 7 we see fairly large variability in the guidance again. The system could have already hit the coast anywhere from about Cooktown through to about Ingham, or the system could be remaining offshore, moving in a more southerly direction. We're not sure yet. So once again, the landfall is not a done deal, and I need to stress this: it is not a done deal. It's not as if we're saying it will hit the coast from Cooktown to Townsville. What we're saying is that the ones that the models that do have this hitting the coast have this hitting the coast, either the North Tropical coast or the tropical coastline, Herbert Lower Burdekin coastline, or even as far south as the Whitsundays at this point in time. But there is still guidance that keeps this further out to sea and not hitting the coast at all. And there is still that FIM guidance, remember, the one that pushes it southwest-south and then almost hits the coast here around the Hervey Bay or southern central coast region. So there's also that guidance to be taken into account. So folks, we still don't know yet. What we do see a little bit of evidence of at the 5 kilometre in height level, the 500 hectopascal height level, is that as we head further and further into next week, we head into a situation where we see a little bit of an amplification of an upper trough here over inland Queensland, with the possibility even of an upper cut-off low developing. And if that happens, and you can see this 584 decimeter line pushing further and further to the north with each one of these, and once that happens, it is likely to introduce upper level westerly winds further to the north, and that will do two things. It will probably try and shear away the cyclone if it remains offshore, and the second thing it'll do is probably try and push it away from the Queensland coast. So really the window of opportunity for a coastal Queensland crossing is any time up to and including Thursday, possibly Friday, and then after Friday the chances become less and less of a Queensland coastal crossing, because by that stage we start to see an increase in upper level westerly winds. The thing to note with that, though, is that just before those upper level westerly winds shear the system away, they are likely to intensify it quite dramatically. So if it remains off the coast on Thursday and maybe even Friday, before that wind shear gets to the system, we may see an intensification, fairly rapid intensification of the system, from where it would normally be maybe a category 1 to a more intense tropical cyclone. So those upper level westerly winds can be a double-edged sword. So yes, it may keep the system offshore and may keep all the rain offshore with it, but before it does that, it may intensify or help intensify that system by creating a very nice outflow channel towards the south. And so that outflow channel will help to intensify it quite dramatically just before it gets sheared away. Now, if that happens at the same time as the system approaches the coast, obviously you don't need to be Einstein to figure out what that could mean for the coastline. And this potential rapid intensification is what the GFS model is picking up on its approach to the coastline in the last few runs. And you can see that the system is quite an intense tropical cyclone over the last few runs as it approaches the Queensland coast. Now, once again, do bear in mind that that is not a done deal. Alright folks, that's all we've got time for the Queensland one. I know I said we'd talk about WA, but we really don't have time tonight. And really the WA stuff is going to happen a long way into the future, and it's got a fairly low percentage at this point in time. So there's no point spending too much time on it just yet. So at this point in time, we need to talk Queensland, and we've done that ad nauseum tonight. So hopefully tomorrow, we won't be updating tomorrow because the cyclone is not an imminent threat to Queensland, but we will be updating you on Sunday now, and we'll be updating from Sunday. We'll be updating every day as this system approaches the Queensland coast to keep you up to date with all the latest guidance. Thanks very much for watching tonight, and we will talk again on Sunday. Remember, we will have regular updates on our Facebook page, so subscribe to our Facebook page. You can, if you don't have Facebook, you can purchase our app, and our app will allow you that opportunity to have a look at that Facebook feed without actually having Facebook. Alright folks, thanks very much for watching. Talk to you again Sunday. Good night.